our conversation. Please feel free to put your questions in the chat and Camilla will let us know afterwards. So welcome to the Stories That Shape Us again. Um, so my first guest is Curlyn Prass. I'm going to pin us so Curlyn and I can have this conversation. So I can see you clearer, Curlyn. And we won't be able to see you if you raise your hands or anything like that. So we're going to invite you to put your questions in the chat, please. So afterwards we can attend to them that way. So welcome, Curlyn. I know it's super early for you and you're up with us
Yes, thank
to
you.
have this conversation with us. I want to also invite you to please share the Zoom link to friends and to family and put it on your status. Don't put it in WhatsApp groups where people don't allow sharing.
Right.
Please put it in places where people allow sharing so that people they know that we are here and that we have started. So I want to introduce you to this amazing woman. We met this year, earlier this year, when I was doing workshops around starting your ministry. I met Curlyn then. She came in one of the workshops and it resonated with her and she went on to do our Wholehearted Living program. And she is an amazing, gifted, talented woman. I can tell you, Curlyn is super talented. I am amazed all the time by her talent and her gift. And she's using those gifts to serve God and to build up his kingdom and to help young people. She has a passion for young people to know about the gospel, not in the way that she got the gospel. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Curlyn. So Curlyn was raised in an ultra-conservative Adventist environment. She grew up on the teachings and methods that were meant to draw her closer to God, yet often left emotional and spiritual wounds. Her story reflects the struggle of many who were taught about God without truly experiencing his love. And today she speaks openly about faith, healing, and unlearning harmful narratives, pointing others towards a restored understanding of God's character and a personal life-giving relationship with him. I know that's her heart. And Curlyn has a podcast called Beyond the Pews, and you can find that on Spotify, and
Mhm.
she meets on Zoom here on a Saturday evening, 3 p.m. EST, 8 p.m. or is it 7 p.m. now, UK
Yes.
time, where she talks about that story. So, Curlyn, welcome to the Stories That Shape Us podcast. So tell us, Curlyn, about what that was like. Tell us a little about little Curlyn growing up in that ultra conservative environment. I'm sure when you were little, you didn't know that that was what it was. It was as an adult looking back. But tell us what it was like for you growing up in that environment.
So, well, yes, definitely from babyhood. So I didn't know anything else other than being a Seventh-day Adventist. I was in the children's choir. I was doing every 13th Sabbath, the memory text. We were dressed every Sabbath to go to church. We were like supposed to be like the first in the church. Um, we will spend whole Sabbath, go back home for lunchtime. We cannot play, you cannot do anything unholy during those hours. Um, Friday evening, a little before sunset, we will be gathered for worship. We'll have every morning and every night. We have during the week, we'll have family worship. I will go to church. We'll have the little hats on our head. I can remember the crocheted hats on our heads, us the girls. Um, we were involved in everything in the church, everything. I didn't know anything else. We weren't allowed to go to anything that were worldly. So locally in the Caribbean, we have carnival or little parties and stuff like that. We weren't allowed to go to any. We weren't even allowed to see those things because when this thing would happen, would be during the summer break, August, and we were moved from the location and brought up into the mountains. So we had our second home in the mountains. So we never saw any of the action or the display. So it was very, very conservative. We were dressed a lot in dresses and skirts. I don't think I wore pants properly. I don't think I really wore pants until maybe in my late teens.
I wore my first trousers at 18 and I felt so rebellious.
Yeah.
I felt like I felt like I let my parents down. I think I apologized to them when I was an adult because my father was so disappointed. He shook his head
Wow.
inside. He shook his head inside a lot when I wore my
Wow.
first yeah, trousers. I mean, I did go through some middle years where I stopped altogether. But that's
Right,
why I live in a
right.
cold country and it's cold and I don't like my joints cold. But you said something, Curlyn, that I wanted to kind of touch. You said we weren't allowed to do anything holy, but you were children. So what was
Oh,
that?
like on whole, yeah. So so definitely no TV, no TV on, no secular books. And even when we had friends who were outside that were playful and playing, we weren't allowed to even go outside and play with them. You know, I could remember even during worship was supposed to be so holy. You couldn't even laugh.
And you couldn't
You
laugh
couldn't
in worship.
smile. Right, right. It was very, 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 very solemn, very reverent. So it was very rigid, you know. So honestly, growing up, I didn't find joy in worship. I did
Mm,
not find joy in worship or if, at church, yes, because I was around my friends. But during the divine hour too, you had to sit straight and just stare at the pastor. If I was giggling or being funny with my friends, or you know, I was reprimanded when I got home for
yeah.
misbehaving.
I think they forgot
Yes,
that we were children, didn't they?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yes. So very, very, very structured, very rigid, very, and that still gets me sometimes. 'Cause I'm trying to. Okay, it's not that you could
How does it
enjoy.
get you? What do you mean it gets you
Well,
sometimes?
in the sense of even while having worship, even sometimes when we have family worship, and we might laugh, and then you feel a little guilty for laughing during family worship. I
Still,
remember,
it
yes,
still affects now.
I remember we were well because we there was a lot of Zoom after COVID,
Yeah.
and me and my daughter we were asked, my daughter and I we were asked to do a song service to lead out a song service, and we were singing fine, and then I don't know what happened. She started laughing, and we could not control ourselves. We laughed through the entire singing. And when we got off the Zoom, we were reprimanded by everybody. But we could not. And I'm like, why is it so? Because we were still singing, but we were just, so it's trying to find a balance. It's trying to find a balance. Why not
Mm,
have joy
mm,
in worship? Why not have joy in, and then because Seventh-day Adventists, we are very structured in not lifting up our hands and not
mm,
clapping. There's
mm,
always confusion. When should I clap? Is it clapping too much?
mm,
If
mm.
I lift my hand, would that be seem too Pentecostal? So
Right.
not growing up and then moving to New York and getting a different environment, it's very confusing. It's very, you know,
Yeah. It was
yeah.
confusing.
So
And I mean, those who are
that's what it
listening,
feels like.
we come from different backgrounds, don't we? And we were raised in different homes and different cultural settings. So what might be
Right.
conservative for you probably wasn't, and some people may have never experienced that. And
Yeah.
while we're sharing the stories, not so that we will beat upon people who are
No,
conservative.
no, no, no.
I believe that there was a story behind the extreme.
Right,
I believe
right.
our parents, there's a story behind the extremist
Yes,
ways. And when they were doing it, they don't know that it was harmful. They didn't know that it was going to harm us and that we were going to suffer religious trauma and
that's
leave
it.
God. Because some people do
That's it.
and never
That's
return.
it. That
So
is very true.
is there anything that you can remember, Curlyn, like this ultra conservative age? I remember you telling a story on one of your podcasts when I think you were 7 or 10, and there was fasting and prayer, and you guys had to fast and pray all day and not allowed to eat.
Yes. So we go to church from 9 a.m. and most of the time, as a child, you're not thinking about when they make the announcements about prayer and fasting. So you never really know. But we go to church and everybody would leave, especially our friends. All the teenagers or all the young people would leave. And Then the older folks and then my family would stay back, and we would be praying for the entire time, all during the lunch period, until AY comes back.
Yeah.
And it's until the night when we go back home, we would we would literally get something to eat. And I hated prayer and fasting for that,
Mm.
because the older folks would pray for, I mean, one person would pray for almost 10 minutes, and you're on your knees,
Mm.
and you're not comfortable. And in those days, the chairs, the pews were hard. There were
Yes,
no
yes.
cushion,
No
and you're on the
cushion.
concrete ground. There were no carpets, especially in the Caribbean. And so
Yeah.
you as a child, and you cannot be uncomfortable. You cannot sit down. You can lie down. You have to be in that mode of prayer. And so growing up, it always traumatized me whenever the church mentioned prayer and fasting, and I will be the first one to exit the church. I'll be the first one to be. I'm not going to be part of that. So it was like, I think it was last year was the first time. Last year was the first time I was asked to take part, to help facilitate prayer and fasting, and I literally told the ladies, it was a women's ministry procession, that that was not my thing. And I really found joy in actually praying and fasting. I actually have my own prayer and fast
Mm.
sessions
Mm-hmm.
practically every week, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because now it's personal. Now I have
Mm.
made a choice, and I understand the
Mm-hmm.
reason behind it. I understand. Before, we were just
You
um
have to
put
do
into
it.
it. Yes. And so having that relationship and understanding for yourself is important. And also, parents need to incorporate um, understanding that children have short attention span. But again, it's all about how they were raised, also their understanding of how things should be done. And so they 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 miss. I mean, you lose a lot of people because of how things were done. A
Yes.
lot, a lot, a lot.
I wanted to say, how can we help parents, not make those mistakes? Because, as I said, there are parents we worry about our children. We know
Yes,
that the end of the world is, we can see the signs that Jesus talks about in Matthew 24. And we know the times that we're living in, and we know how the enemy is pulling our children, and we're really worried for them and for their salvation. But I wonder how we can find a balance from your experience, Curlyn, and what you lived through. And I know that your parents felt it was the end of time and Jesus was coming
yes,
soon, and they were worried for your salvation. Maybe that's why they did some of the things
yes,
that they did.
yes, yes.
How can we
Mhm,
help parents that are in that place, do it with, as you said in your bio, a balance of love and grace,
mhm.
because otherwise anything else is going to be harmful. And
Right.
but I want to also put this in. I heard somebody said this recently. How can we do it without pandering to the children, she says. How can we do it without pandering to the children and not err on the side of too much liberality, but we're not
That's it.
we're not going to be conservative and legalistic. Where's the middle? Where is the middle from your experience? How could parents find the middle?
Well, yesterday I was invited to do this similar thing like that in a church, and some of the ladies, because it was Children's Day, were asking the same question. And from my personal experience, for one thing, intercessory prayer, from my studying of Ellen G. White, is not supposed to be a long, drawn out
Mm,
process. We
mm,
are supposed to, before we come to intercessory prayer, in our own private closets,
yeah.
ask God on our behalf to forgive us and to cleanse us and all that stuff. So when we do come and assemble, we are praying specifically
Mm,
for what is to be prayed about. But most of the time, we use that time to
minister,
spend.
preach.
Yes, yes. It has become a preaching session for some people, or showing off their skills of praying. And so sometimes it's lost, because and then the repetitiveness, you know, and so it become mundane after a while, and
Mm,
you lose the audience, and and so when we do that, we should also invite the children to ask specifically, because we have something in our church called Mothers in Prayer. It's every first Tuesday of the month, and so the children are incorporated in that. We have one on Tuesday coming, and the children's ministry have an hour, 20 minutes, and the children are going to be participating. So this is a prayer session where the children are involved. So they learn about, and they love to pray because it has become something where it's not, where it's so rigid. The children are allowed to pray from their heart. They are not told what to say. They are encouraged to speak openly. And so sometimes when a child really says what is on their heart, sometimes we as adults shut them down. And
Yes.
so we should use methods where we make praying something that is reverent, yet inclusive, yet encompasses exactly what's happening in the children's life.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they wouldn't feel like if there's a disconnect. Not that
Mm.
you're praying about them. Sometimes we
Mm-hmm.
only pray, my child is this, is out in the world, or my child is disobedient. Pray about their good things. I did a topic the last time we had women mothers in prayer. Why don't we pray about the good things? Why don't we elevate? We don't praise at all.
Yeah.
We spend so much time telling the Lord, my child is disobedient, my child is rebellious. Thank you for his obedience. Thank you for, for strengthening his faith. Thank you for, so highlight the good in them.
I
And
like the
and
good in them.
yes, and one thing I've always tell others, especially my daughter who's 16, most of the time I do private prayer for her while she doesn't even like, so there'll be situations where she's being rebellious and stuff like that, and I will go to the Lord and pray, Lord,
Mm-hmm.
please soften her heart.
Mm-hmm.
Soften
Mm-hmm.
her heart to the impressions of your Holy Spirit. So instead of sometimes just having the child next to you and calling their name out in all the wrong,
I
in
know
just the
that is so
negative,
harmful. That is
the
so telling them off in
negatives.
prayer.
Yes, yes, just the negatives they hearing. Lift them up and ask the Lord to let His Holy Spirit soften their hearts to His impression, and
Yeah.
that goes along because I've seen results with that. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it,
Mm-hmm.
and our children will thank us for that.
Indeed, indeed. They really do. We shouldn't harm our children in prayer.
Yes,
Pray lateral prayers and tell God the things that we want to tell them, but we don't know how to tell them. So we're going to do it
that's
in
it.
prayer. It's really harmful. And it will
Yeah.
make, I've heard people who not want to pray because of those kinds of prayers. So I work with childhood trauma, Curlyn, as you know, in
Mhm.
practice. For those who are new and is going to be listening to this for the first time, I'm a trauma-informed counselor. I have private practice, and I work with people who are healing from religious trauma, and that's what that is.
Mm.
And,
Yes,
the way lateral prayers, the way parents tell off the children in prayer, and the way the word of God is used as a tool to beat and harm, put the fear, to put fear in them. And it's not the
God.
fear of God, because the fear of God don't make us scared. It makes us, it makes us be in awe of him,
Right.
not afraid of him. We're in awe
Mhm.
of him, and we're in awareness of ourselves, and that makes us want to change, right? Because
Right. Right.
the Spirit of God leads us to repentance. So
Right.
saying that, Curlyn, I want to go back to little Curlyn and those formative years of harm. And then, if you want an expansive view of that, I'm going to invite people to listen to the Beyond the Pews podcast on Spotify.
Right.
So, how did that impact the teenager and the young adult? What did that make you do? Did it draw you closer to Christ? If not, how did it pull you away? What did it do?
So it was like almost like being a robot because basically you're doing everything that is right because you're told that you're supposed to do those things. So it's never actually a personal connection. You're to get up in the morning, come early. It's like 4 in the morning, time for worship. You worship, you get ready for the
Four in the
day.
morning.
Yeah. Get ready for worship and throughout the day. Well, at worship session was also judgment time. Worship session was where Ellen G. White was drilled. That's why I also in my podcast I tell how I hated Ellen G. White growing up. It was drilled into our system that we represent God and we represent this family, and we are to do all these things, and there should be no bad name. I don't want to hear your name in whatever. And the word of God was used to chastise. So anything that we have done before, anything in the future, this was judgment session. And so there was never joy. I cannot. Someone asked me yesterday in our interview about faith being in our home. I can't remember the word faith. I cannot remember the word faith being a part of my formative years, because it was a working class family, and we were only told about um, doing the best that we can so we get good jobs and we could represent the family. But I don't remember faith, the word faith, being an actual part of our life. And so
Wow.
learning to experience that later, learning to trust, learning to know God for myself, aside from what I learned, it was a total, I was thrown into the sea when I was 18, and I was on my own, having to navigate, studying for myself, knowing God for myself, because I did everything by the books. I went to church. Um, I hated worship. I
Mm.
hated Ellen G. White. I hated, but I did all the right things because I was in the children's choir. I was in not adventurous yet. Um,
But you had to though.
yeah,
You did
yes,
what was
yes,
expected of
yes.
you. Yeah.
Yes, yes. AY, have to know all the memory verses, but they never connected. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize that until I was older, that
Mm-hmm.
those things did not connect, because when I had real life situations that I had to deal with, I had nothing to look back onto. I didn't have anything to hold on to, but to find it for myself, or to the new people, the new families that are around me that I had come to know, and the church environment, because I went to a church in New York that was like a family, and
Mm-hmm.
that also helped build up my spiritual walk, even though I was
When did
living a
you ever
double
leave?
life.
Did you ever leave church?
So I did not leave church, but I was living a double life.
Okay.
I was living a double life. So, like I've said on my podcast, that I would be, even as a young adult and a teenager, I would be in church on Sabbath, but I had a boyfriend who was not in the church, and then I also would go to a lot of parties, and I love to dance,
Mm.
and I love to dance really bad.
I was gonna say, how
So
did you learn to dance? Bearing in mind how you were
it
very.
was just like it seemed to be my system, because even though I have nostalgia, when a song
Mhm.
come on, I would naturally want to dance. And that is
Right, right,
something I'm
right.
fighting now as an adult, because it has been something, it was like a freedom. I was able to express myself through dancing. And I didn't
Mm-hmm.
even realize that was something I actually turned to as a
Mm.
way of expressing myself.
It was an
Because before I
outlet.
didn't, yes, I didn't have a voice before. I did not have
Okay.
a voice. So it was just do all the right things. There was no way for me to have my own opinion, you know? And so now I had a chance. I was very, oh my goodness, I love to dance. I love to
Mhm.
dance. And so that was my way. We would go to like house parties, like especially in Brooklyn and stuff like that. And I would be on the dance floor from the time it starts to the time it ends. And
Mhm.
I'll be the little Adventist girl who's going all the way down to the ground and back. And I'll find the person who's dancing the baddest, and I'll be with him
Right.
to show up and so it was like still, and then on Sabbaths, I'll be singing Holy, 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 you know?
So
So
how did that duality affect you? Because I mean, that must have left you with a lot of guilt and shame.
yes,
And, yeah.
yes. There was a lot of guilt and presumptuousness. So that
Mm.
presumptuousness was very dangerous, because
Mm-hmm.
I would do all sorts of things, especially on Friday nights.
Mm.
Especially on Friday nights, I will do all sorts of things that I'm not supposed to do. And then
Mm-hmm.
Sabbath morning, I'll be on the altar singing and
Mm.
crying. And I'll be
Mm.
praying, Lord, in the process of doing the wrong things, I'll be praying, Lord, please save me, because you have
Mm.
something and look
Mm.
out for. But
I
it was
wonder
very,
I wonder if some of
yes,
that curling is just a natural, because I think everybody has to naturally make their way to God. And it looks
yes.
different for everybody. Everybody has to work out, as the Bible said, their own salvation with fear and trembling. Everybody has to work out their relationship with God. How much of that was the young person working that out? And how much of that was because I couldn't do anything and I felt so constrained that I'm now able to do it, so I'm going to do it.
Oh my God. So A lot of it. So one of the things were we had to wear hats,
Mm,
growing up, and
mm.
our hair was all covering. Now, it was just lately I've learned that the reason why I shaved off my head, I used to shave off my head, like totally shave it down further than this. Whenever I got into a situation that I couldn't handle, because the only things I could have control was my head, I would shave off my head.
Whoa, I was going to ask, how did you deal with crisis? And so this was one of the emotional impact of growing up with with no voice, with no ability
Yes,
to make decisions, no, will not being heard,
yes.
and that's the only thing you had control of.
I
Wow.
had control of my hair and my eating. So I've
Mm,
always been skinny, and I've always wanted to gain weight. But whenever I have a crisis, I will not eat.
mm,
And I told my friend last night that when um when I was okay, so one of the ways of punishment, we were beaten a lot. And so when I was beaten so bad, I would stop eating and then I would get sick. And when I get sick, then I was taken care of. Now, as an adult, I
ah,
realized, I
oh wow.
realized that I was still looking for that format. So even now, when something happens to me, I would not eat. And I want to eat, but I will not eat. And it's just about within last week or something happened, and I said, I'm not eating. And it
Mm,
clicked. It literally clicked because remember, I'm going through with you with this, with the trauma and all that stuff.
hmm.
But I'm sabotage. I'm not self-cutting, but I'm
Yes.
starving myself.
Wow.
And at the same time, I don't want to be skinny because when I lose the weight, I get the guilt and I get frustrated. And so it finally clicked, but you want to be sick so that you could be taken care of.
But that's so deep, Curlyn. I want us to pause there for a little bit because I think that is such a massive impact. And I want parents who are still doing this because they're parents who are still living in, doing the conservative, not that conservatism is bad. We're not saying that.
Right,
You harm your children. And you were saying in this ultra conservative home, there was no love. You had to wake up 4 o'clock for worship. You had to do fasting and prayer when you were 7 and younger. You couldn't play you couldn't laugh in worship. All of those things, you know what you couldn't do, but you didn't know what you could do. And so
right,
because of that, and of course, there was no love, no connection, no emotional support, no emotional needs
right,
met. And so this
right.
thing, when we are forcing these things on our children and it's not balanced with love, this is the harm that it created. So you're saying, because I wrote spiritual crisis, I wanted to ask, how do you deal with crisis? And you're saying one of the ways you've learned to deal with it. And also, I was in Sweden recently and somebody asked me about hitting children, and I'm like, no, I don't agree with it. And he was saying, well, spare the rod. And people think if I beat my child, I'm not sparing the rod, I'm spoiling the child. I'm
Yeah.
training them for later life. You're saying you were beaten, but there was no
Mhm.
love, there was no balance.
No, no, no.
And because of that, you learned a system very
Hmm.
young. And that
Yeah,
system was when they hit me, don't eat because then I'm gonna
right.
be comforted. And so
Yes,
really what the child wanted was comfort. That was
yes, yes,
absent.
yes,
Comfort was
yes,
absent. This really gets me when I'm talking to parents, it really gets me. A child has to work out a strategy
yes.
to get
Hmm.
comfort and nurturing from parents who are pushing, and I think it's from their own trauma. And that's why I encourage
Yes,
parents to heal
yes,
because you now took that with you throughout life and you only found out last week that that's what you were doing. Only
yes.
last week.
Only last week because something came up and I immediately reverted to that. And I'm like, but wait, I had to, because I've been asking the Holy Spirit to reveal to me my trauma accuser, and he
Yes.
revealed that one. He revealed also me not wanting to bathe or be dressed. I never taught myself to be a depressed person. I've
Mm-hmm.
never taught myself to be somebody who's depressed. But I would get into a mode where I would not get dressed, I would not bathe. And my friends, I roommate with my friend, and I would tell her every Sunday is no bathing day, no dressing day, no whatever. And she used to always call me bipolar because I would have highs and lows. And I never knew those were things from my childhood
Yeah.
because I would go to a function. I would go to a function with people I know, and I would find a corner with a blanket and stay in that corner while everybody's having fun. And I didn't know, I never understood why I was doing those things. And it now started making sense in my head because I didn't know how to manage um, situations because we were very sheltered. There were eight of us
Hmm.
in the family, eight of
Mm.
us. How much kids? I know two adults and six kids, right? And so we were always, it was us. We weren't allowed to go out by friends. We weren't allowed to go in a lot of circles. So that's all we knew, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
And even within the family, there was still division because we didn't know who to trust within the siblings.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
it's still happening. It's still happening to today that even us as siblings, we don't know how much to tell who because it will go in a circle, will be negative because that's the environment we're growing.
Because they
Yeah,
learned how to
well,
survive in
that's
a
it.
family that was, and it was, I'm gonna say, dysfunctional.
Yeah,
They learned how
yeah,
to survive, and that was their
yeah,
survival strategy.
yeah.
Mm.
So so cutting my hair, and my sister could not understand why I always cut my hair because she says you have such good hair. And when I allow my hair to grow, it will be a big afro. It never goes down, it goes up into an afro. And everybody will like, you have such an amazing afro. And then something will happen and I will shave that entire head. My husband, even he complains about it. I shaved the whole hair off, and then I will regret it. But that was my way of coping with
Hmm.
whatever situation I was in, you
Mm.
know, and
Mm.
not eating, and I didn't even connect the dots until recently. That
Hmm.
starving myself or not bathing or not dressing was all someplace I was going in my mind thinking, okay, I'm safe. I'm safe in those
Hmm.
situations.
Mm. We
Yeah.
we work out, and you say you prayed recently, and the Lord showed you your trauma
Yes,
response.
yes. I have
And
been reading, this book, Common Sense Philosophy,
hmm.
Psychology.
Hmm.
I think it's a Seventh-day Adventist lady that used psychology, but using the Word of God. And I've also been reading that, and it has helped me understand that truly what happens here affects, and I always have negative thoughts. I always have negative thoughts. I'm always expecting bad things to happen. So especially because I was punished so much for every single thing, even in my adulthood, if I sin or did something wrong, I was expecting all during the day or all during the week for something bad to happen, something really bad to happen.
Because that's what you were
And
trained.
yes, I'm expecting a result, a negative result, somehow, somewhere. And I told my husband about that, and he's like, "But that's not how God deals with you." And I didn't know about grace until I met my husband. He explained
Mm.
to me about grace, that God is not waiting to punish because that's all I knew.
Yeah.
There's a consequence. There's a consequence.
Yeah.
So, you know,
There's a consequence. And we're told a lot about the consequences and not so much about grace. And isn't it amazing that in a home where they were telling you about the end of time and God and Ellen G. White and the Bible and all of that, they never told you about the love inside of God.
mhm,
You never saw him modeled in it. And I think sometimes when I just started Wounds to Scars, that's something I was so passionate about because we hear this a lot in sermons about, the end of time, and we heard about God's justice and judgment, but
mhm,
we didn't hear so much about his care and his kindness
mm,
and that he's compassionate and he's long suffering and he's abounding in goodness and
yes,
truth. And we never heard about the side of God where he told Moses, when Moses says, "Show me your glory. If you don't go with us, we will not go." That's who he showed Moses was merciful and gracious and long suffering and abounding in goodness and truth. And that's who he is as
mhm,
well,
yes, yes,
but we don't hear about
yes.
that side of him. So your husband taught you about grace.
Yes, yes, he's been because he comes from he came into the church, and so he was
Okay.
always excited about Sabbath. He always whistling and excited about Friday evening and Sabbath worship and going to church and um the joy of studying the word. I mean, I love studying the word, but the joy of it, and God is love and all that stuff. And I'm watching and I'm, are you crazy? I don't
Yeah.
know that God. I do not know that God, you know?
Mm.
And so learning about that God now, and what I've been telling him, I said that this is an experience that most SDA children that grow up in the SDA church are experiencing the same thing like I do,
Yes.
because we are
Absolutely.
grown on legalism. We're grown on all the 10 commandments, all Ellen G. White commandments, and all the church's commandments. And so and so we are going through just going through the motions. The majority of us that are showing up to church every Sabbath are literally just sitting there because people know we're supposed to be there.
Yes.
We're not drinking the drinks, we're not eating the stuff because people know we're not supposed to. But
Sadly.
once, yes, and we're wondering why when our young people go off to college or they have an avenue, they leave
Mm,
because
mm, mhm.
the restraints are off. And that's why sometimes they go to the far end because nothing has been modeled
Yeah.
along the way that shows the God of love. I didn't know the God of love. I used to tell him, you talk about God in a way that I have never seen God that way.
Mm, 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 mm.
I know he loves me because when I had my daughter, it was a miracle to me. I mean, but to know that constant, because my feeling of God is that when I'm good, he's good with me. When I'm bad, oh, he's bad with me.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
that's the God I knew. So when I was bad, I'm waiting for the waves
Yeah,
and waiting for the
I know about that God too.
so that's the God I knew.
Yeah. I understand that. I understand that. I want us to talk a little bit, Curlyn, about you talked about how you got to know Grace and the transition that you're making. Tell us about how you came to live Grace.
Well, especially with my daughter. Um, it's a learning experience still because I would have the automatic feeling of, if you're not doing it this way, you need to be punished. Or if you don't hear what I'm saying, you're going to be punished. But I've learned now to be more in my closet than to immediately spew out the negative feelings to her. I've
Right.
learned to give in her um, grace in the sense of because she's like, Mommy, you don't understand. And I truly do not understand because every generation says that the generation that's coming is worse than the one before. So
Yeah.
our parents would have said that we were the worst generation.
Yeah.
But as I've been telling the youths and her that they have so much more than what we experienced, and they have nothing to hold them up. Because right now, most of the adults are struggling because of trauma. And so they're pulling themselves back.
Yeah.
You understand? Because they themselves don't even know how to handle what's
Hmm.
going on. And so our children are just in a lull situation without a protection. And they don't think the church are meeting their needs. They don't think anybody understands them. They don't think anybody understands them. So when I usually teach the junior and early teen classes. When we have lesson study, most of the time we do not even touch on the lesson because I let them use that time to talk to me about what's going on in their life. And we talk about situations like pornography and masturbation and homosexuality, things that are actually in their life. So I give them that space and the grace to be real, to be heard, to express themselves without any judgment. Because I told them
Mm.
I did it all. I've done it all and I understand. And for me, like I told my husband recently, I am a 5-year old or a 15-year-old in a 50-year-old body because my brain never grew up.
Mm.
I'm
Mm.
always resorting to that childlike, that I'm looking for that happiness. I'm searching for that happiness that I've never really connected to. So
Yeah.
like I called my sister about 3 weeks ago and I asked her, fill in the gaps because I cannot remember my childhood, the good moments. Fill in the gaps. And we sat down for almost 3 hours talking about things that I don't know if my brain blocked it out or I never saw it because I couldn't understand. And she was trying to fill in the gap for me because I don't remember. I only remember the negatives. I only
Wow.
remember the trauma. I only remember, so yes, so
And
grace is important.
that's what our brain is like. The brain will our brain have a preference for negativity, and when you grow up around so much chaos and instability and hurt, the things that there are pathways that has created around that. And so as
Yes,
adult, and that's why healing is so important, because we learn to sort through all of that in adulthood, and find moments that were grace filled. And sometimes it might not be from our homes. It might be somebody at church. It might be a teacher.
right,
It might be the
right.
neighbor, a friend's parent, and we call that resourcing experiences that people need as we're healing. And there are adults who don't have any resourcing experiences. And so
That's
we're
true.
creating those in adult life. And that's why we have groups at Wounds to Scars, because those groups sometimes serve as a space for an adult who've not had any of those experiences to start to create them for themselves.
Yes, yes, yes.
Somebody, I want to go to the chat in a minute, Camila, if you could let us know what the questions are in the chat, please. But I want to know, Curlyn, how I know all of that. When did you decide that I want to help young people who have lived what I've lived, help them understand? Because you just said you let young people talk about things that we do not hear in church. You're talking about
Yes,
pornography,
yes,
masturbation, homosexuality. We only hear that from a place of condemnation, and you're creating space for them to talk out those things, and they really need
yes.
a space to talk it out, because we need to make sense of what's going on in our head and how we're feeling and all that kind of stuff. And you're creating this non-judgmental space for them to do that. That is bold work. What made you decide to do that?
So tell you, God is amazing. So I've always loved to work with children, and um, well, my daughter is an example because she has friends, and so they would gravitate to come around me and talk. And she loves to have sleepovers, so they're always over at my home. Sabbath school. I always wanted Sabbath school to be a very interactive experience for children. I always emphasize with my teachers downstairs that the children are in school all week. When they come to Sabbath school, it should not be like they're in school. It
Right.
must be an environment where they should be able to express themselves. We should use a lot of nature stuff because that's the second book that God teaches through. And the children, when they're smelling and tasting and touching, using all their five senses, what we're teaching them comes alive. And so I've always been driven to find ways to reach the young people and the children. And once I was given the opportunity to teach the teenagers, whenever they come to Sabbath school, they were very depressed. They would sit like this and they didn't want to hear anything about God because to them it did not make sense. It was not relatable. And so I started doing um, the Bible. Oh gosh, where you put in pictures in the Bible, we're making the Bible come alive by cutting out pictures and putting in the Bible itself.
Okay.
Yes, yes. So I used to do that with them, and then one time we had a convention at our church. Our church in Grenada is the main church. So all the young people from all over the island came. And service was going on upstairs, but they were just idling. And so I don't know, I found myself among them and they were just talking. And so I just started asking questions. And I did not expect them to be so honest with me and to be so open with me about those things. And we started talking about all those things. And they were shocked that I was willing to let them be able to
Mm.
express themselves and to be open and um to be honest about it. And they were asking for it. So whenever they came to church, they didn't want to go upstairs for divine hour. They
Yeah,
would
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Sister Baptiste, Sister Prass, come, let's have session together, they were begging for that. And
Mm-hmm.
that opened my eyes to that we are not meeting the needs of our young people. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes even in AY, sometimes we are very cautious about how we speak, and and so we don't use those forums to allow our young people to express exactly what they're feeling. And we're still asking them, tell us what you need. Tell us what you need. And when they do, we're still telling them, no, this is not the appropriate
You
place.
shouldn't need that. You shouldn't need
Yes.
that.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
this is not a
Yeah.
place. And then we have to get people to be able to back up and whatever. And I'm like, but we experience those things. Our
Mm.
testimony is
Mm-hmm.
more relevant than
Mm.
a pastor saying, thus said the Lord. Our testimony, our personal experience. My daughter would always say, Mommy, I never knew you went through those things and how you handling it. And she's willing to tell me everything that's going on in her life.
Because
She's willing to,
you're human to her, because you're human
yes,
that had struggles and challenges, and we do
yes,
that as well. We share honestly with our children because it just,
yes,
why are we gonna lie to them?
yes. And so she's willing to go tell her friends, my mommy knows I'm going through this struggle. And she's willing, because one time she told me a struggle that is very deep for her. And she sat down and she said, Mommy, I was afraid to tell you this, the struggle I'm going through. And when she told me, she was weeping. She was like, you literally, you understand, you're not gonna judge. I said, no, but I'm gonna tell you that's not what is accepted, but I understand that it's a struggle, and I am gonna be praying for you and with you.
Mm.
And this has
Wow.
been my constant thing with her. I'll always check in on that specific thing. Okay, I know you have all this temptation in this direction, and I point, because I had a struggle. I don't know if I could be open with masturbation as a child.
Yeah.
And when she was like in her preteens, I went to her and I asked her personally, if you have that issue, let me know.
Yeah.
So I could
Yeah.
tell you. I
Yeah.
could tell
Yeah.
you about it, because I had a struggle with Ellen G. White. I used to read messages to young people about it, and and the crippling effects it will have and all that stuff. And I used to always question, and nobody could have given me an answer. Because some people tell you, yes, it's a good way. I studied so much about it. It's a good way to release yourself and all that stuff and all that, da, da, da. But I had a struggle. And and so when I studied for myself, and then I said, you know what? Hereditary tendencies, hereditary causes are on our children. I went to her
Mm-hmm.
early and I asked her.
Mm. Mm.
I went to her very early to let her know, Mommy struggled.
Yeah.
Mommy has those thought process. Mommy will be inclined to go do this. Mommy will be inclined to do that. I know you might be, let me know, you know? And so we could pray about it or we could talk about it.
Such a weight off her shoulders now.
Yes, yes,
Such a
yes,
weight off her shoulders, Curlyn, where because our bodies, when our bodies are growing and developing, we have feelings, around a certain time for a woman, the feelings might be
yes,
heightened.
yes.
All of those things are going on. It's natural and normal, and they don't know what
Right.
to do with it. What do I do
Yes.
when I feel like this? And so we have to provide solutions for our children as opposed to pretend that it's not going to happen. And if you have natural, normal feelings, that it's dirty and it's bad, and it's not. And that's why sometimes young people get married and the intimacy in marriage becomes an issue because their whole lives they're told that that feeling is bad and you shouldn't feel it. And then they get
Right.
married and the feelings happen and you think, hang on, this is bad. This feeling is bad.
That's
Therefore,
it.
it
And
doesn't become good all of a sudden.
I have heard many of my married friends who told me they have never gotten an orgasm because they have held their stuff, and even being with their partner,
Yeah,
they cannot be comfortable enough. My experience also, I was never allowed to be around any
yeah,
boys. And so
yeah,
I've never ever learned how to manage myself about dating and stuff like that. My first date was when I was 30 years old.
yeah.
And
30,
so
30.
30,
Yeah.
30. So I never knew how to deal with emotions, how to, if a guy talked to me, how to handle a situation, I never knew
Mm,
how to do that. So
mm.
it was
Because you
all,
weren't supposed to.
yeah.
And we're not,
So,
I wanted to clarify, Curly, we're not saying masturbation's right. We're saying
right,
the
right,
feelings that people
right,
have when your body
right,
feels aroused, that's normal.
Right.
What should young people do with those
Do
very normal feelings that's going
feelings.
to
Yes.
come, is what we're talking about.
Yes.
How do you help
Yes.
them to manage the
Process.
feelings so that they're not going to go to masturbation? Because then we're told it's wrong and you mustn't do it, and we don't want them to be doing it.
Right.
But what do we do with the feelings? Because the feelings are
Yes.
normal and natural, and that's what I mean. The feelings are normal and natural. It's our bodies feel when we get to certain ages in our lives, our
Right.
bodies feel a certain way. And some of us, who young people who have experienced sexual trauma, will have those feelings earlier because love was awakened too
Exactly.
soon.
That's
What
it.
do you do with those normal, regular feelings? And so that's why in marriage, sometimes young people get married and the sexual part of marriage becomes a real burden and becomes a problem in the marriage because they're told the feelings is wrong, shut it down, lock it off, and then you get married and it's supposed to be abundant and it doesn't work like
That's it. And fulfilling. And
that.
one thing I want to mention, the masturbation part also opens the door for pornography. And we're having a lot of young people struggling with both now in our churches.
Yes,
I
of
remember
course.
sit, I remember sitting in church one time in New York, and I was sitting in church, divine hour, and I was sitting behind a young man who had his phone open to pornography
Wow.
in church
Wow.
during divine hour. And so
And so,
we we do not realize how comfortable now it has become for young people because it's there. It's
yeah,
in everything.
it's
It's in
available.
everything. And so in those things lead into each other. Now, because we were not told, we didn't see the whole picture. Sometimes we experiment not knowing how what it will lead. And it also really degrades your mind. So when your thoughts should be clean, it reverts to those things. So yeah, all those things were had to be told to educate our children.
Wow. There's so many places that we could go to Kurt with Curlyn, but we have a few guests today, and please stay with us throughout the day. The last
Mm.
guest is also going to talk, not necessarily along lines like this, but how he survived having, challenging, growing up it wasn't an ultra conservative home, but he's a pastor's child, and all the pressures that come with that and how
It's
he
wonderful.
navigated that. So I'm asking you to stay around. I'm going to put the link in the comment section for if you want the replays for these early. They will be posted on our YouTube channel, and they're also going to be posted on Spotify for our podcasts scattered over the weeks. If you want to get the replays from today, I'm inviting you to join our email list. I've put the link in the comment section. All right, Camilla, we have time for about 2 questions before we move on to our next guest.
Yes.
Camilla?
All right. Thank you so much, Curlyn. Your story is very interesting and it also is very inspiring. And we have many questions in the chat today.
Yes.
However, we are only able to respond to two. All right. So Maricela said, how could you find joy? Just a comment. How could you find joy in such an environment? I had a similar experience, just such a gross misrepresentation of who God really is. Hence, one of the reasons our youth leave our church message as soon as they can. And we see where
Mhm.
this is a recurring issue within
Mhm.
our church. All right, so for our first question, we have it's anonymous. How did this trauma affect in your intimate relationships or dating situations? And I know you would have touched on that, Curlyn, but if you could just go in a little bit more in depth on that. Thank you.
So I was very promiscuous after I started dating, in the sense that I allow my first boyfriend to experiment, I guess, and because I wanted him to love me. So, so finding love in the wrong places and equating love with how somebody treats me, you know, even though it was negative. So I would think as long as he's with me, he loves me, even though he was doing all the wrong things, you know. I had a boyfriend who was very selfish, all about himself. And I was always giving. So I would constantly be looking for the best gift I could give to him. He had access to my bank account, all those things, hoping that he would stay or he was the right one for me. And then he was no good. And then I dated another one, hearing all the, hold on, I'm with you, just stay with me as long as he could do whatever he wants, And I had to, when I started, after I had my daughter and I started studying the word of God for myself, I had to realize, okay, no, those things were not good for me. So being married now still is a struggle because my husband comes from a very loving family. So his sense of love is different from my sense of love, from my understanding of love. So trying to find a balance, So I'm like a childlike bride, with an adult who is mature. So there's trying to find the middle ground. I'm still trying to experience the world in a new lens when he is mature and this is what is supposed to be done and this is whatever. And I'm like, well, why can't we have fun? Why can't, So trying to find, and in my head, I'm like, you're an adult. You need to behave like an adult, And so I guess that's why I like to be around the children and the youth because my whole being is like, this is what I have missed and this is what I always wanted. So I'm always attracted to that, but I'm still trying to balance the adulthood in my life, which sometimes doesn't always line up, So it's still a process. It's still a process for me.
Thank you for sharing so honestly, Curlyn, because it is a process. It is a journey. And that's why we provide the space at Wounds to Scars. I'm going to keep, talking about the spaces that we provide here so that adults who experience childhood trauma can do that growth journey in a safe space where they're not judged for acting 15 when they're 50 or 30. Because we will grow chronologically, but we're not growing in any other way. It needs to grow. We can take one more question, Camilla. Thank you.
All right, no problem. Thank you so much for sharing that. That was just so real, and those are the conversations that we have here on stories that shape us. All right, our next question is, and I'm asking these questions simply because I've seen being repeated in the chat. What does worship look like for you now with your family? How did you heal from that? So how did you transition from the way you were raised to know how you worship with your family? And have you spoken with your parents and how did that go, if you have?
Okay, so the last question, spoken to my parents. So my dad died last year. Well, we as siblings tried to talk to him. We had tried individually to talk to him about how he have affected our lives, but he has never taken accountability. He's always said he's done the right thing, So he's never really taken accountability. So even after he died, I had to process that. I didn't grow up with my mother. If you ever heard Beyond the Pews my story, I never really grew up with my mother. So I had a stepmom. She also, she had her struggles. And so she wrote me a letter later in my life expressing, saying sorry for the way she grew us up because she thought she was doing the right thing. So she understood that it really damaged us and she apologized. So it's still a process. The part of worship. So worship for us is still, so me and my daughter, we as I tell you, childlike. We want to laugh and be silly during worship session. And my husband, who's he's an elder and he wants, can you imagine? I married an elder. He wants to be very reverent. So sometimes we are singing and laughing and he's like, you got to be holy. You got to be holy. You got to be holy. But I am more comfortable to express myself in worship, I'm at a place where we're having fun. He loves to sing, so we sing a lot of songs. We're able to, and we have discussions. We're able to discuss what's on our mind. Like, so my daughter will say, "I don't understand this. Explain this to me," and we're able to discuss that, stuff like that. So, and it's not like a judgment session, you know. So it's a lot different, a vast different. And we got our own pace. Sometimes we sing a song, we pray, and we're done. Sometimes it's longer, you know? So it's not as rigid as it used to be before. It's not as rigid. I mean, it's not like we're praying. And sometimes, I grew up knowing if you don't kneel down to pray, you're not praying to God. And so I still have struggles with that if I'm sitting on my bed and worshiping, if I'm being holy enough, you know, because we were taught that you need to kneel down to pray and you need to be in a posture. As they will tell you, in a posture of prayer. And so now worship time is enjoyable. It's enjoyable. Mm-hmm.
But thank you so much, Curly, for sharing that with us and for just being honest. For me, I believe that as Christians, God has created this space where we can have, God asks us to be like a child. Before we can enter into the kingdom of heaven, we ought to be like little children. So, for those that have joined us, if you have similar experience, just know that you can go to God with your childlike faith. And I'll now turn over to Joanna.